There is a ridge in eastern Kentucky where the same 6 surnames appear on headstones going back 200 years. The names look plain, English, forgettable. But if you follow any one of them back far enough, past the census, past the church roll, past the first land deed, you will find a gap. A moment where the paper trail goes quiet and a different name appears. And then nothing. Somewhere in that silence, a family made a decision. They picked up a new name, the way you pick up a tool, not because they wanted it, but because they needed it to get through what was coming. The mountains of Appalachia have always been a place people ran to. They ran from debt, from sheriffs, from slavery, from Indian removal, from landlords, from wars that didn't include them in the peace. And when they crossed into those ridges and hollows, a lot of them quietly set down the name they came in with and picked up something that would not get them caught. This is not ancient history. Some of these families are still here, and the name above the door is not the name their great-great-grandparents were born with. Stay until the last one, because that family's story ends in a way nobody expected. Collins is one of the most recognized names in Appalachian history, and most people who carry it have no idea what it once covered. The name appears Irish on its face, and for many families, that is exactly what it is, an anglicization of the Gaelic O Coiliane. But in the mountains of Tennessee and Virginia, Collins was something different. It was a shelter. The Collins families of Hancock County, Tennessee, were among the first core Melungeon families documented in Baptist church records in 1813 in Scott County, Virginia. They were listed in early census records as free persons of color, a legal category that in the antebellum South sat in a strange and dangerous in-between. Not enslaved, not recognized as white. Vulnerable to being legally reclassified, taxed differently, stripped of land rights, or denied access to courts. Vardy Collins and his kin settled on Newman's Ridge in what would become Hancock County, and they kept to themselves in a way that was not unfriendly, but was very deliberate. Collins was a name that could pass. It looked English, it looked safe. It gave a mixed ancestry family a surface that the law could not easily grip. The hollows kept the secret the name was built to hold. In the mid-18th century, a man named Gideon Gibson appeared before the governor of colonial North Carolina to answer a complaint that his family was living in the colony illegally. The governor looked at him, looked at his property, and decided Gibson was white enough to stay. That decision was not based on blood. It was based on wealth, manners, and the social performance of whiteness, and Gibson had mastered all three. The Gibson family were among the earliest documented free families of color in the colonial South, their roots traceable to Virginia in the late 1600s. Over generations, they intermarried with white settlers and pushed steadily into the Carolinas and eventually into the Tennessee-Virginia mountains. By the time they appear in Appalachian records, they are clustered with other families who shared the same complicated background: Collins, Mullins, Goins, Bunch. The Melungeon Heritage Association lists Gibson as one of the founding surnames of that community. What the name hid was not a single secret, but a layered one. African ancestry, Native American intermarriage, generations of strategic social repositioning. The Gibsons, who sat before colonial governors and passed, were not lying exactly. They were choosing which part of the truth to show. James Mullins arrived in Hawkins County, Tennessee, in the early 1800s. Local records called him Irish Jim, which tells you almost nothing except that someone wanted to make the origin clear and simple. The Mullins name in the Appalachian Mountains carried Irish credentials derived from the Gaelic O Maulalide. But in this particular stretch of northeastern Tennessee, it was also one of the 5 surnames most consistently associated with the Melungeon community. The 1809 to 1812 tax lists for Hawkins County record the family spelled as Collins, and at least one entry as Mullins, the spelling shifting not because the family changed, but because the clerks were phonetically guessing. That phonetic guessing was itself a form of cover, a name that could not be reliably spelled, could not be reliably tracked. Drumgool, an early observer of the Melungeon community, noted that the Mullins families were proud and combative about their origins and would fight over the question of their Indian blood, though DNA studies conducted much later showed no Native American ancestry on the direct paternal line. What they were defending was not genealogy. It was the version of their identity that the mountains had allowed them to keep. Michael Going appeared in Granville County, North Carolina, in 1754 in the tax records as a white man. 5 years later, in 1759, the same county tax list recorded him as Michael Goin, mulatto, one man, two racial classifications. 5 years apart, the only thing that changed was who was holding the pen. The Goins family, also spelled Goins, Gowan, and Going, is one of the oldest free families of color documented in colonial America, with roots tracing to Virginia in the 1600s. Scholars studying their history have found the surname appearing not only among the core Melungeon families of Tennessee and Virginia, but also among the Lumbee of North Carolina, the Redbones of Louisiana, the Ramps, and the Moors of Delaware. Different communities, different mountains, same handful of surnames that marked a free mixed ancestry network stretching across the colonial South. The name itself appears to derive from an anglicized form of an unidentified African name brought to Virginia in the earliest period of the colony. What that original name was has been lost. What survived was a version the English-speaking world could write down without needing to know what it meant. The family carried it into the hills and hoped the hills would be enough. Stephen Cumbo was a Revolutionary War soldier born in North Carolina, and for a long time, the genealogists who went looking for his family assumed they were looking for Scottish roots, the way you do with most Appalachian names ending in a hard consonant. They were wrong. The name Cumbo was a corruption of an older name, Cumbo, and the original Cumbo was not Scottish at all. According to records held at the Virginia State Archives and documented by the Cumbo Family Genealogical Project, the earliest documented Cumbo in America was Emmanuel Cambo, an African man who appears in Jamestown documents in September 1644 as an indentured servant to the Virginia Assembly. He was freed in 1665, granted 50 acres in James City County in 1667, and started a family that spread through Virginia and the Carolinas over the next century and a half. As the family moved and intermarried, the name morphed Cumba, Cumby, Cumby, Combo, each spelling variation, tracking a branch that was finding a slightly different way to be legible to the society it was moving through. By the time Stephen Cumbo appeared in North Carolina, the African origin of that name was buried under 3 generations of phonetic drift. He did not correct the record, neither did his children. When German-speaking settlers began moving south from Pennsylvania along the Great Wagon Road in the early 1700s, they carried surnames that English-speaking neighbors could not reliably spell or pronounce. Schmidt became Smith, Muller became Miller, Zimmerman became Zimmerman or Simmerman. The transformation was practical, immediate, and total. Documents from Sullivan County, Tennessee, record Johann Heinrich Myers settling in Piney Flats in the late 1700s, and his son John Henry Myers anglicizing the name in the next generation without ceremony, no legal proceeding, no recorded decision, just a different spelling on the next document. Researchers studying German influence in Appalachian Tennessee have documented the same pattern across dozens of families. Stoffel was originally Stoffel. Ketron and Catron were originally Kettenring. The English-speaking colonists who encountered German immigrants heard Deutsch and wrote Dutch, a confusion so total that it gave an entire cultural community a permanent misnomer. The Pennsylvania Dutch that had nothing to do with the Netherlands. For many of these families, the name change was not a hiding but an accommodation. The mountain itself did not care what you were called. The land office did, and land offices wrote in English. The Schmidts, who became Smiths, were not fleeing anything. They were simply making themselves legible to the people holding the deed. The name McCoy arrived in Appalachia, carrying 5 centuries of Gaelic history behind it, and most of that history had been systematically stripped away by the time it landed in the mountains of Kentucky. McCoy is an anglicization of the Gaelic Mac Éoda, son of Éod, a name tied to fire, to an ancient Celtic deity, and to clans that held territory across Ulster and the Scottish Highlands before the plantation of the early 1600s forced tens of thousands of Scots-Irish families onto ships headed for the American colonies. The spelling itself encodes the stripping. Mac Éoda can become McCoy, McKay, McKay, McKee, McGee, or McHugh, depending on which century, which country, and which clerk wrote it down. In the 1901 census of Scotland, fewer than 140 people spelled the name McCoy, while the Mackay spelling had more than 26,000 bearers. The name crossed the Atlantic rare and arrived in America common, reshaped by a recording system that heard Gaelic sounds and wrote English approximations. In Kentucky and West Virginia, the McCoys became famous for a different reason: the feud with the Hatfields along the Tug Fork River from 1863 to 1891. But underneath the feud was the older story, a name that had already survived one empire before it arrived in the mountains to survive another. In the tax records of early East Tennessee, a family appears under the name Kettenring. By the next generation, the same family appears as Ketron. A generation after that, as Ketron. 3 spellings, 3 decades, one family working its way through the English-speaking world, one court clerk at a time. The Kettenring family was part of the wave of German-speaking settlers who moved down the Shenandoah Valley from Pennsylvania in the mid-1700s, following what was then called the Great Wagon Road, a colonial route that carried Scots, Irish, English Quakers, and German families alike into the mountain interior. For the German families, the phonetic distance between their names and the sounds English clerks could reproduce was vast. Kettenring had no English equivalent, so clerks wrote what they heard first, Ketron. Then Catron and the family accepted the result, because there was no mechanism to correct it and no particular incentive to try. The same process produced Stoffel from Stoffel, Snyder from Schneider, and Baker from Becker. Each transformation was a small erasure, not of identity exactly, but of origin. The family knew where they came from, the record did not, and in Appalachia, where the record was often the only thing that stood between you and losing your land, the record's version eventually became the real one. The Bunch family appears in Bertie County, North Carolina, in 1764, and the tax assessor that year listed Jeremiah and Henry Bunch as free male mulattoes. The following year, the same assessor recorded them as white. The year after that, they were mulattoes again. 3 consecutive years, 3 different racial classifications. The only constant was the surname. The Bunches were one of the core families associated with the Melungeon community in Tennessee and Virginia, listed by the Melungeon Heritage Association alongside Collins, Gibson, Mullins, and Goins as among the earliest surnames documented in those communities. They were also, like those other families, part of a much older network of free mixed ancestry families that had been moving through the colonial South since the 1600s, marrying across racial lines, accumulating land, and navigating a legal system that could not decide what to do with people who did not fit its categories. The racial reclassification in the Bertie County records was not unusual. Researchers studying the colonial South have found families whose racial designation shifted from census to census, not because anything about the family changed, but because the definition of whiteness itself was being actively negotiated in the courts, the churches, and the tax rolls. The Bunches survived all of it by being exactly who they were and letting the record argue with itself. In the mountains of southwestern Virginia and northeastern Tennessee, the name Bolan sits alongside Collins, Gibson, and Mullins in the earliest documentary records of the Melungeon community. Like those names, it appears on census records that shift racial classification from year to year, white in one decade, mulatto in the next, and like those names, it was carried by a family that had learned the art of being just ambiguous enough to survive. The Melungeon Heritage Association lists Bolan among the surnames of the first recorded Melungeon families, placing them in the same network of free people of color who moved out of coastal Virginia and the Carolinas and into the mountain interior in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. The name itself likely derives from an anglicization of a French or Gaelic name, Bolan or Bowlin, which places the original family somewhere in the tangled geography of Scots-Irish and Huguenot settlement in the French colonial backcountry. What the name became in Appalachia was something different from what it started as. It became a mountain name, a ridgeline name, a name that appeared on church rolls and land deeds and militia lists and did not call attention to itself. That was the point. A name that does not call attention to itself is a name that keeps you safe. The Denham family told a story about themselves for generations. The story was that they came from Portugal. It explained the darker complexions, the unusual features, the way the family did not quite fit into the standard categories that early Appalachian society wanted to impose on everyone it encountered. It was a good story. Portuguese ancestry was a respectable claim in the antebellum South. It implied European blood, Catholic civilization, a connection to the age of exploration. It did not imply the things that a different ancestral claim might have implied about voting rights, land ownership, and access to courts. The problem with the story was that it was not true. David Denham's Revolutionary War pension application, held in federal archives, states plainly that he was born in Louisa County, Virginia, not Portugal, not the Azores, not anywhere across the Atlantic. The Melungeon Heritage Association lists Denham among the founding surnames of that community, alongside Collins and Gibson and Bunch, all of them connected to the same network of free people of color who found their way into the mountain interior before the racial laws of the 19th century made that interior the only safe place to be. The Portuguese story was a survival strategy that outlasted the danger it was designed for by at least 100 years. If Appalachian ancestry is in your bloodline, and for a lot of you watching, it is head over to the OriginDNA website. I have a 3-volume PDF guide bundle that shows you exactly how to read your raw data and maximize your ancestry or 2,3andMe results. Link is in the description. But don't go yet. The last part of this video is the most important. The name, Caudle, spreads across Letcher County, Kentucky. Like creek water, it finds every hollow and settles there. Genealogists who have studied the name have documented dozens of branches, all descending from a small group of brothers who arrived from North Carolina in the early 1800s, and they have found something else as well. At least some unrelated families adopted the same spelling simply from living in proximity to the original Caudiles, creating a genealogical knot that researchers are still untangling. The name itself likely derives from Caudle or Caudle, a Welsh surname that moved through the English Midlands before crossing the Atlantic. That Welsh origin was irrelevant by the time it reached the mountains. What mattered was that it was a mountain name now, and mountain names in Appalachia accumulated stories, the way ridgelines accumulate weather. Researchers studying phonetic spelling in rural court records have found Caudle rendered as Caudle, Caudle, cattle, and at least 3 other variants across Letcher County alone, each one a different clerk's best guess at a sound that had no standard English equivalent. The family knew their own name, the record did not. And the gap between those 2 versions of the same sound is where most Appalachian genealogy actually lives. Justice is one of those surnames that sounds more like an aspiration than a name. In Appalachia, it appears in clusters Mingo County, West Virginia, Pike County, Kentucky, Buchanan County, Virginia, and it has been echoing through those ridges since the early 1800s. The origin is almost certainly a phonetic transformation of a German or Dutch name. The most documented path is through the German Justus, a given name that became a surname in the colonial period and was then flattened into its English near equivalent by clerks and record keepers who heard a sound and wrote what they knew. Some researchers have also traced branches of the justice name to the same Melungeon-associated community as Collins and Gibson, noting that it appears in triracial community records in Virginia and the Carolinas before the family moved into the mountains. In the 2010 U.S. Census, the highest concentrations of the justice surname were in West Virginia, Kentucky, and Virginia, precisely the geographic core of the old Appalachian settlement zone. A name that sounds like a virtue is carrying the history of families who needed something that sounded unquestionable. Justice was a name you could not easily argue with at a courthouse door, which was exactly the point. Grindstaff is one of those Appalachian surnames that announces its German origin in every syllable, but has been so thoroughly absorbed into mountain culture that most people carrying it have never thought to look behind it. The name derives from the German Grindstaff, a compound word meaning raw material or base substance, a name that in the German-speaking world would have attached itself to a craftsman or tradesman, someone who worked with foundational materials. In the Shenandoah Valley and the Carolina backcountry, German settlers carrying that name ran into the same problem as every other non-English family moving through a record-keeping system built for English sounds. The name was too long, too Germanic, too difficult for a county clerk with 30 land entries to process before noon. So it became Grindstaff, phonetically close enough, legally functional, and stripped of the original's meaning. Grindstaff today is almost entirely an American name, concentrated in the same Appalachian counties where German settlement was heaviest in the 18th century. Carter County, Tennessee; Watauga County, North Carolina; Washington County, Virginia. The families who carry it are almost certainly descended from German immigrants who crossed the Atlantic with one name and arrived in the mountains with a close approximation of it. The original word is gone. The family stayed. Fox is the last name on this list, and it is the one that costs the most to say plainly. In the mountains of Kentucky and the Carolinas, Fox is a translation, not a corruption, not a phonetic accident, but a deliberate choice to render an English word in place of a Cherokee name. The Cherokee clan system organized families into 7 clans based on the mother's line, and clan names were not surnames in the European sense. When missionaries and government agents began requiring Cherokee families to adopt English-style surnames in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the process of translation was often brutal in its simplicity. An elder whose name carried the word for fox in the Cherokee language became Fox. A man whose clan or personal name referenced a wolf became Wolf. A woman whose name referenced a bird became Bird. The surname that replaced the Cherokee name did not carry any of the meaning the original held: the clan membership, the ceremonial associations, the kinship obligations encoded in it. It carried an English word and nothing else. For Cherokee families who remained in the mountains of western North Carolina after the Trail of Tears, the English surname was a form of camouflage. It made them legible to the world that had decided to stay. Fox is a plain English word, and underneath it is everything the word was designed to replace. None of these 15 families sat down one morning and decided to lie. That is not how names change in a place like Appalachia. Names change the way water changes a riverbank, slowly, under pressure, one small decision at a time, made by someone who was trying to get through the week. The German settler who let a clerk write Smith instead of Schmidt was not ashamed of being German. He was in a hurry to record his land claim before the office closed. The free family of Culla, who kept the name Collins and moved to a ridge where nobody knew them, was not pretending to be something they were not. They were making a calculation about survival that turned out to be correct. The Cherokee family that accepted Fox in place of the name that encoded their clan was not surrendering their identity. They were protecting what was left of it. What you have in the mountains of Appalachia is a record of every pressure that American history applied to the people who lived there. And the record is written in surnames. Drop your surname in the comments. Tell me where it came from, or where you think it came from, or where the family story used to say it came from, before somebody did the research and found something different. The name you are carrying right now has a story. Somebody in your family knows part of it, and this might be the week you find the rest.
Thanks for watching this video. Before you go, your raw DNA data has hidden stories waiting to be unlocked. Tap the link in the description to download your ebook copy and find out what they are.